Come on up. I always have to give him a hug when I meet him. So go for it, Nipun.
Fantastic. I think this is the first time I've received a standing ovation before the talk. Thank you all. My name is Nipun. I want to talk to you about something that may be super off the wall, but I enjoy doing that, and I hope you do too. This is actually a billboard that I saw in the Silicon Valley. It was only up for one day until they finally realized that you can't, commercialize the Dalai Lama. But it's a very interesting statement. On the face of it, be selfish, be generous seems like a paradox. But that's only true if we have a very materialistic worldview. If we start looking at our inner ecology, that paradox starts to unravel. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. But before that, I want to start with a quote by Oscar Wilde. It says, "Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing." It's very interesting. For $10, your organization can buy the rights to emit 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide into our common environment. For $7,500, you can hire a human being to be a guinea pig in your extremely risky medical trials. For $250,000, you can have the right to shoot and kill an endangered rhino in South Africa. Everything. Life has a price, death has a price, everything in between has a price. But what about the priceless? How are we going to deal with that? Technology. In this crowd, everyone knows Moore's Law. I mean, in many places you have to explain this, what the Moore's Law is. We know what it does. Right? And it has been true. We're probably going to hit the point of singularity in maybe another decade or two. It's incredible. It gives us more computational power than ever before, and it's growing exponentially. A very good representation of this is this photo. This is 2005 when the Pope was announced. Hundreds of thousands of people are gathered, and the new Pope is announced. Everyone celebrates. Now, 2013, Pope Francis is announced, and here's the photo. Everyone has a mobile. Everyone has an iPad. Everyone's taking photos. So we know this. But what happens when this goes unchecked? What happens if it's technology for the sake of technology and we have no grounding in values? Right? It becomes extremely dangerous. This is Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn. Wall Street Journal. He says social networks do best when they tap into one of the 7 deadly sins. Facebook is ego, Zynga is sloth, LinkedIn is greed. Very interesting. What happens to compassion? What happens to generosity? What happens to kindness? Do those things matter? Or are we just going to take this as status quo and let it be? These are important questions to ask. If Gandhi was looking at our world, I sometimes wonder what he's looking at. He's probably looking at all this stuff and a lot more. 2 billion in extreme poverty. The rich and poor divide unprecedented. Nature is being pillaged. Urbanization is destroying village cultures. Economic growth, unsustainable. Science is used for mass destruction. I mean, the list can really go on and on and on. What are we going to do about these problems? And how do we actually think about some of these problems? So I look at human exchanges. I look at how people, over many generations, over many different, in many different settings, how have they interacted with each other, and how is that changing? So if you look deeply at it, it's kind of simple. You can categorize it in 4 categories. The first is what I call a casino. Just gambling. Everyone knows you kind of gamble. You have no connection. You're just kind of playing with things. Then there's commerce. A lot of ethical commerce. We have rules to enforce that ethical behavior, which is good. Then you have barter. And you have a lot of local economies where you have local barter, sometimes without legal tender. And then you have gift, where you're just giving for the love of it. Now the reason why you go from where are we in our world? Turns out, if you look at the data, 98% of our world is in the casino. European Union last year passed a legislation And they said, well, if you're trading stocks, you have to hold it for at least a certain period of time. What did they say? How long? Half a second. Half a second. In a snap of a finger, people are trading like crazy. Millions and millions of trades. Right? Is that really investing in a company because you believe in it, or are you just gambling? So we have a lot of that. And when you go from the gift world to casino world, what you really start losing is a connection to your inner ecology. Everything is external. Everything is material. Everything is on the outside. Inside doesn't matter. But as all of you entrepreneurs know, of course, any problem is actually just an opportunity in disguise. So how do we change that? That process of changing, of reconnecting, is what I call inner transformation. I think we need to create that. A lot of people say, well, idealistic, utopian, never. Impossible. Can't happen. Yeah, nice guy talking, telling stories, wonderful. But really in practice, it's impractical. But human beings are very good at doing the impossible. If you look at it, this is a photo of Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister, this is, let's see, I think May 1954. He does something that human beings have never done before. He runs a mile in less than 4 minutes. It was thought to be impossible. He runs it in 3 minutes and 59.6 seconds. It was incredible. Made headlines everywhere. It was like the miracle mile. But then, an interesting thing happened. 3 months later, another runner, a Finnish runner I think, John Landy, breaks the 4-minute mile. 3 minutes and 56 seconds. And over the next 3 years, something remarkable happens. 16 people break the 4-minute mile. Now what happened? Did they get steroids, new technology, new shoes? None of that. Someone broke a mental barrier, thought it was impossible. As soon as he breaks it, allows everyone else to do it. And that kind of impossible is what I like to play with, particularly in the direction of love, generosity, compassion, connection, right? These values. Social entrepreneurship came along as like a big possibility, people solving social problems through entrepreneurial skill set. But I actually think it's a misnomer. It should be called entrepreneur social. Because what social it's like everything is social. Right? My company has a vacuum cleaner, it removes dirt in your life, improves your life. That's social, right? I mean, we really muddled the word. But what does it mean to be social first? And then apply entrepreneurial skill sets to that social mission. Those are what I call social first entrepreneurs. And there are several of them. I want to tell you about 2 of them really briefly. 2 of whom, they both passed away. But I had a personal relationship, a very rich relationship with both of them. And I'm very inspired and actually honored to be even bringing their name into your consciousness. First is Dr. V, founder of the Arvind Eye Hospitals. Some of you might know him. In his late 50s, he was crippled with rheumatoid arthritis. If somebody even touches his bed, he shrieks in pain. In that pain, he says, I want to serve other people. There are those who are blind, and with just a half-an-hour surgery, their blindness would be gone. Let me learn to be a doctor. With those crippled fingers, it takes him 3 years. He learns. He becomes a doctor, ophthalmologist. Now imagine all you VCs in the room. You want to, invest in. Okay, this guy has like a nice intention. Crippled guy in his 60s. Do you want to invest in a hospital? Of course not. So he says, I'm going to mortgage my own home, build a 9-bed hospital. He says, for every paid customer, I'm going to do 2 poor patients for free. Guess what? Scales to the world's largest network of eye hospitals. Everyone at Harvard is the longest case study in the history of Harvard. Everyone at Harvard in the first semester, for the last, I think, 18 years, you have to study this. It's an anomaly. President of India, former president, Abdul Kalam, stood in the free line. He didn't know any better, and he got the same service. It's an incredible story, but social first. This is Ishwar Patel. He applied the same thing. He was maybe, I think, 5th grade, and his teacher said, okay, clean street competition, what are we going to do? So everyone goes out and cleans the streets. A village woman, comes up to him and he says, oh, Isha, you're an untouchable now. You can't do this. And he touches her gold earrings, puts some water, and says, okay, you're clean, but don't ever make that mistake again. He goes back to his teacher and he says, wow, if our tools are untouchable, what about people? In 5th grade, he dedicated his whole life to this cause. And not just dedicated, he was an innovator. He actually innovated toilets. Hundreds of thousands of toilets in this country are designs by him. He could have made millions, and he would say, look, you want to copy my design and make millions? You go ahead. This is what I'm going to do. Dedicated her life to it and change the face of sanitation in the country. So such people do exist. But where are those models for doing this in the internet era? And that's what we have to think about, and that's what I want to probe into. So social, I should say, so I want to zoom into the word social. Like, what does it mean to be a social entrepreneur? What does it mean to be, so, like, how do you define social? I think there are three categories. First is awareness. Internet, of course, is amazing at awareness. It helps you really spread the word. This is, you probably can't read it, but 476,000 friendships between India and Pakistan in a 24-hour period. Facebook releases this data in various combinations. It's great. There's more peace in the world. People are connected. But these are loose ties. Right? So it is good. It's better than not. But it's not that deep, so it has an edge. You might have heard of this guy, Santiago Swallow. 85,000 Twitter followers, and he has that little blue check, you know, it means you're famous or something, you're verified. He's spoken at TED, a writer, upcoming personality, except the guy, some guy made him up. Right? He didn't actually exist. And he wrote this article that went viral online. It says, how I became internet famous for $68. And he explains exactly the process. You know, he goes in, for 18 bucks, he creates a WordPress site. For 50 bucks, he buys 90,000 Twitter followers. He has this service that allows him to automatically tweet like random things, you know, the random combinations of words. And he mashes up various people's images using some software, and he's got a face. And people are like, yeah, you know, this guy's the up and coming, and you know, you have all these tweets, right? So it's an edge. It's an edge. So the internet can do awareness, but it also has disadvantages. The second thing is impact. Some of you might have heard of Tom's Shoes. They have a good model. They say, look, if you buy one pair of our shoes, we will donate another one to people who don't have shoes. That's really nice. But it has an edge. Impact also has an edge. These are the feet of Tarahumara Indians, one Tarahumara Indian runner. So in the mid-90s, this is a Mexican indigenous tribe. Now they're a tribal culture, so they run a lot. Someone went and visited them, said, hey, you know, you guys are good runners, you should come and race in this big race that happens in the US. It's in the Death Valley, 120 degrees. It's like very hot Fahrenheit, very hot. And you're running 100 miles. So it's like, it's an incredible test of human endurance. So these guys say, okay, I'm going to go do it. So they show up, and at the front line, you know, everyone is all ready, all those people who have trained, they have like nice shoes and all this gear, and they're ready to run, you know? And here are these guys with those sandals, with those flip-flops. People look at them, are you serious? Are you going to do that? And they're like, yeah. So this is how we run. So they start running. Sunset time. These guys stop, and they're looking at the sun. So other people are like, okay, it's a race. You don't just stop and like look at the sun, you know? You should keep running. You're doing it to maximize your time. They said, no, this is what we do every day. We pay our respect to sun. Okay, well, do whatever you want to do. They keep running, and then there comes the finish line. They're not only the first, they get the world record. Some guy who had like knee injuries looks at this and says, wow, these guys are running without anything. And I have all these knee injuries with shoes. He popularizes this thing called barefoot running. So they say it's actually better to run barefoot than to have shoes on. So many times we look at our world and we say progress. You know, we mistake activity for progress. We say, oh my God, yeah, I did all this, and then you really like loop around and then you're at the same point. You know? So impact also has an edge. We keep saying impact, and we, pat each other on the back. We get a group of 10 of us, or maybe 10 million, and say, this is great. Guess what I've done? And they're all like, your 10 million friends say, wow, that's amazing. But who knows if it's actually amazing? Maybe it's just going around in a circle. So how do you take a critical look at that? And the third circle is transformation. This is what happens inside you. But there's all kinds of neuroscience now that has come out, and they talk about meditation. Like the Marines in the United States are meditating. It's not just an Eastern thing that some people in the Himalayas do, It's something that actually changes your mind. And now we have science that tells us, well, you better do it. And if you do it, it's going to be great. And people do have awesome results because of meditation, which is fantastic, gets into transformation. But on the inner world, there's no checks and balances, right? So it can be very dangerous. Like this guy saying, somewhere, I'll bet there's a cooler infinity I can be one with. You know, you keep repeating the same patterns. So just that by itself also has an edge. So all three of these things, awareness, a very simple example, one I like to use all the time, is about smoking. You show somebody, look, you shouldn't smoke. This is what will happen. These are the x-rays of a smoker, and this is what will happen to your lungs. Okay, that's good. Then you have impact, which says you want to get out of that pattern of smoking. You probably need a nicotine patch, which helps your body get out of that. But that still doesn't get you out of the pattern of addiction, because then you're probably just going to find something else and keep the pattern going. So transformation does, gets you out of that pattern of addiction. So all three of those put together make for a pretty formidable case. And if you study all the social change leaders, where they work at is at the intersection of all three of them. Awareness, impact, and transformation. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Aung San Suu Kyi, Cesar Chavez, the list goes on, but they were not just doing the easy thing. They were not just saying, let's spread the word, or let's just create impact that's measurable. They were doing that. That's also valuable, but they also honored the inner transformation, and that was key. But what they had to do, what they couldn't do rather, is they had to use a one-to-many model. Right? One of them, many of us. Some of them might have gone to the one-to-one model. Of course, your network is worth a lot more if you can create one-to-one instead of one-to-many. But now what the internet allows us to do is many-to-many. This is the capacity of the internet. And when you pair that up with awareness, impact, and transformation, when you're working at the intersection of three of those, and you can create a many-to-many possibility, you are talking about a whole new solution set that previously, as far back as just 10 years ago, was just considered to be impossible. And we see this in so many different manifest ways. This is the question that we ask. I run an organization called Service Space, and we work at the intersection of three of these things. Now, ours was kind of a startup too. It was in the Silicon Valley, 1999. Right, when I graduated from UC Berkeley with computer science and philosophy degree, all my peers were doing their startups. And it was like the gold rush. You know, it's like you know how to surf and the big wave has come. Like, this is your chance. But something about it didn't sit right with me. And I said, let's play boldly, right? Super boldly. Like, even forget the thinking out of the box. Throw the box in the recyclers and start again, you know? So most people were talking, okay, I want to create a big company. I want to raise a lot of money. I want to have big impact. Very reasonable. Right? Especially if you were talented and in the valley, that's what you were doing. Along came Service Space. We said, well, if you want to play boldly, that's like the traditional solution said. What if you do something entirely different? So we said, how about instead of having no staff, distributed volunteers? Which means, so if you look at Wikipedia, for example, people are just typing and editing. But someone actually added up all the time that it takes people to edit all those articles. 100 million volunteer hours have been donated on Wikipedia. Futurist Clay Shirky, internet futurist, he said that's actually just 1%. We haven't even tapped into the 99% of possibilities in that domain. So we said, okay, well, let's see what happens. So far, so good. Big money, right? And sometimes you get obsessed with this big money and you play all these games around it. We said we just want to be clean. So no fundraising. That was one of our rules. Even big foundations came and said, you guys are doing great stuff, and we're sorry, we don't fundraise. You know, they're like, we'd love to. You know, please just fill out this form. We don't do that. So they're like, how the heck are you going to survive? I said, you know, there's this thing called gratitude. Like, we can actually create a gratitude economy. Even if you don't need something, if my cup of gratitude overflows, I'll be giving just for the sake of that gratitude. Do you believe it? Do you not? Well, maybe it's naive, but we'll see. You know, if I die believing in gratitude, that's okay. Right? So we decided to do that. And everyone's talking about big impact, but big impact is this one-to-many model. We're talking about small nudges, small actions. And if you look at it in a network, the small actions can create an incredibly viral effect and change the whole network culture. And we saw that repeatedly in many ways. So a couple examples of how all this plays out. Right? Our question was, what designs emerge if you lead with inner transformation? You lead with, of course you create impact, and of course you need awareness, but what happens if you lead with inner transformation? I think three things happen. First, you have personal transformation. Talked about smile cards. They're here, and there's a whole bunch there. Smile cards say you do a small act of kindness and you leave somebody a smile card. Now the smile card says you don't know who did it for you, who did that kind action. Let's say you pay toll for the car behind you. So you don't know that person in front of you, but the smile card says keep the chain going. Do something for someone else. I live on the 4th floor. Right? And on the 4th floor, my neighbor sometimes will leave, this is in Berkeley, he'll leave his trash outside. So if I'm going down, I carry his trash and throw it in the trash. And I leave a smile card. One time I left a smile card. Lo and behold, a couple months later, I had some boxes outside, they were gone, and there was a smile card. Like we have 4 units on our floor, and everyone is starting to look out for each other. Instead of neighborhood crime watch, we have a neighborhood kindness watch. It's incredible. It's amazing. I could tell you story after story of how people have done beautiful acts. One of my friends loves to, whenever he gets upgraded to first class, he goes to somebody in economy, says, sir, you've just been upgraded, and that person is going to have a story for the rest of their life. And he just has to be a little bit inconvenient. And if you're tall, maybe a lot more. But it's so worth it, you know. It's so worth it for that person's joy. The second is when you have enough people who are sensitized in that way, you can start to create these mini gift economies. And that's collective transformation. This is Karma Kitchen. It's a restaurant where you walk in, you have a meal, and your check reads 0. It's 0 because someone before you has paid for your meal, and you get to pay forward. People just hearing that cry. Researchers, of course, they scratch their heads. They're like, what the heck is going on? We've had Berkeley professors come in, I don't believe it, you know, this guy, and they come in and they're like, I don't know how it works, but it works. Now they're doing research on it. There's some fascinating research on how paid forward can work. But what do you have? When I do something for you, you do something for someone else, that person, you know, let's say we're all giving each other a shoulder rub, right? I do it for the person in front of me, and everyone goes around, and someone behind me takes care of me. And when that happens, what do we get? We get the circle. If it's just quid pro quo, this is my $5 and give me this, you know, my order, and this is what's owed to me, and you're working for that, and that relationship is very different. Right? You don't have the circle, you don't have the commons, and when we erode the commons, we lose what it means to be human. So this is what happens once you practice these smile card acts, it starts to create these circles. Those are mini gift economies. And the last thing is that it can actually start to change a culture when you have people who stand up and become not just social entrepreneurs, but I call them generosity entrepreneurs. This guy is one of them. His name is Uday Bhai. He's a rickshaw driver. But he said, I believe in people, I believe in love, I believe in goodness, and okay, I don't make a lot of money, I'm day to day, but I want to run my rickshaw on a gift economy basis. Most people, when you sit in, I've heard that Bangalore has like a rickshaw mafia also, where you say, I want to go from point A to point B, and maybe they take you to Yelahanka and then say, oh, that was just on the way, you know? And you come back and you say, gosh, you know, the ethics in this country has just gone down. But if you go and stay with that guy, with that rickshaw driver, you realize that he has been systematically violated. He also has kids, he also has dreams, and he can't get access to that dream from any other place, so naturally he has to start doing this. So you can kind of understand his situation. But it's a stalemate. But who's going to break that stalemate? People like him. He says, I'm going to run my rickshaw on a gift economy basis. You sit down and everyone asks him. I told him, everyone's going to ask you, does it work out? Does it work out? So I said, keep detailed records. And he did. Point A to point B, some people give a little less, some people give a little more. On average, it balances out. But then, if you ask him, how does it work out, he'll show you this. And then he'll give you a second book. He says, this is where people wrote how they felt. And how come that has no economic value? Of course it doesn't. But it matters. It matters to him, it matters to that other person. And he has been changing. Everyone's like, who's funding this? Why are you doing how? He's like, look, it's just me. I'm just paying it forward. I'm trusting people instead of just doing transactions. And when you have a population that is ignited like this, you start to create a revolution. Right? You start to create an entire new set of possibilities. So I want to close with, one quote, but before that, I want to show you a little video. It's only 90 seconds, but it's really beautiful about what the world would look like from the eyes of a child if we actually had this kind of culture. it's really up to us to create that kind of world. I want to end with the last quote. It's by Gandhi. It's the one that everyone has read. It's called, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." But what is most interesting about this quote is that Gandhi didn't say you must preach the change you wish to see in the world because let's raise awareness. He didn't say you must do the change you wish to see in the world because we need to create impact. He said instead, let us be the change you wish to see in the world because your inner transformation is the greatest place of leverage for changing yourself and for changing the world. So I invite myself to be the change. I invite you to be the change. I invite all of us collectively to be the change. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, I get one before and after. That's great.
Here's a small gift for you from NASCOM.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Now we're ready for drinks and dinner sponsored by Avantgate. So please join Nipun and please